My hands were still shaking when I pressed my thumb against the screen, because $18,000 doesn't just disappear from an account that took me 15 years to build. It was 11:47 p.m. I was still in my school clothes, red pen still capped in my hand, a stack of ungraded essays fanned out across the kitchen table like nothing in the world had changed in the last 90 seconds. But everything had. The notification sat there glowing, refusing to be unread. Wells Fargo alert, unusual activity detected, transfer completed, $18,000.00, account ending in 4471. I know that account number better than I know my own social security number. I opened it the year Leah was born, back when she was 8 pounds of noise and possibility, and I promised myself, standing in a hospital room smelling like antiseptic and fear, that she would never once lie awake doing math on tuition the way I had. 15 years of skipped vacations, 15 years of a car I kept patching instead of replacing, 15 years of one number growing slowly, quietly, sacred, and now $18,000 of it was gone, in one transfer, at night, while I sat 12 feet away correcting a teenager's run-on sentences. My name is Margot Day. I teach 11th grade English at Whitmore High School, the same school I graduated from 24 years ago, in the same small Ohio town where everyone still calls me Mrs. Reyes's daughter, even though my mother's been gone 9 years. I am not a dramatic person. I am the woman who color codes lesson plans and remembers every student's birthday and has never once raised her voice in a classroom in 22 years of teaching. I built my entire life around steadiness because I grew up in a house that had none, and steadiness was the one thing I swore I would give my own daughter, no matter what it cost me. Which is exactly why at 11:48 p.m., 1 minute after that notification landed, I was already moving faster than I had in years, barefoot on cold tile, laptop open before I'd even sat down, fingers hitting the wrong keys twice because they wouldn't stop trembling. The login screen felt like it took a year to load, and when it finally did, I understood immediately that this wasn't a glitch. This wasn't fraud from some stranger halfway across the country. This was worse. Because the recipient account had a name I recognized instantly, a name that made my stomach fold in on itself. Vantage Creative Solutions, my husband's business. Daryl. I sat there at my kitchen table at midnight, my daughter asleep 2 rooms away, and I felt something crack open inside my chest that had nothing to do with money at all. To understand exactly how far I fell that night, you need to understand where I started, because the two things are more connected than I ever wanted to admit. I grew up the daughter of a woman who cleaned houses for a living and never once complained about it in front of me, even on the nights she came home with her knuckles cracked from bleach and her back so tight she couldn't sit up straight through dinner. My father left when I was 6, and the only memory I have of him leaving is the sound of the screen door. Not slamming, just clicking shut, quiet, almost polite, like he was trying not to wake anyone. That click has haunted me more than any shouting match ever could have. It taught me, long before I understood what it was teaching me, that the most dangerous kind of leaving is the kind that doesn't make any noise at all. My mother raised me on a philosophy she repeated so often it became scripture in our house. Steady is safe, baby. Steady is the only thing nobody can take from you. She said it while stretching a single paycheck across 2 weeks. She said it while sewing my prom dress herself because store-bought was a luxury we didn't have. She said it for the last time from a hospital bed 9 years ago, 3 days before she died, squeezing my hand so hard I still remember the exact pressure of it. I built my entire adult life around that word, steady. I became a teacher because it was steady work with a steady paycheck and a steady schedule that let me be home when Leah's school bus pulled up every single afternoon. When Leah's father left 4 years into her life, no click of a screen door, just a slammed one, loud and final, and somehow less painful for being so honest about what it was. I doubled down on steady like it was armor. I built routines. I built savings. I built, brick by brick, exactly the kind of life my mother had told me nobody could take from me. Which is precisely why, when Daryl Voss walked into my life 11 years ago, I wasn't looking for excitement. I was looking for more steady. I met him at a school fundraiser, a silent auction for the marching band's new uniforms, held in a gymnasium that smelled like floor wax and lukewarm coffee, the kind of unglamorous evening that somehow ends up mattering more than it has any right to. He wasn't flashy. He ran a small consulting firm out of a rented office downtown, the kind of steady, forgettable career that gave me exactly 0 reasons to worry. He brought me a paper cup of that terrible gymnasium coffee without me asking for it, and something about that small, unnecessary kindness undid me completely. "You looked cold," he said, which wasn't even true. I wasn't cold, I was exhausted, chaperoning a room full of teenagers bidding on baked goods with money their parents had given them for exactly this purpose. But I took the coffee anyway, because it had been a very long time since anyone had noticed anything about me at all, cold or otherwise. He never flinched at the fact that I came with a 9-year-old and a mortgage and very little patience left for games. He sat through every school play without checking his phone. He learned to braid hair badly but enthusiastically for Leah's dance recitals. I have a photo somewhere of him with 3 bobby pins in his mouth, concentrating so hard on a French braid that his tongue was sticking out slightly, and Leah laughing so hard at his reflection in the mirror that she nearly fell off the stool. He remembered my mother's death anniversary without being reminded, and every year on that day, he'd leave a single yellow tulip on the kitchen counter before I woke up, because yellow tulips were her favorite, and I'd mentioned it exactly once, years earlier, in passing, half asleep, barely aware I'd said it out loud. I want you to sit with that detail for a second, because I've sat with it more times than I can count in the months since all of this happened. A man who remembers a dead woman's favorite flower for 11 straight years does not, in your mind, look like a man capable of what I'm about to tell you. That's the whole point. That's exactly the point. The men who do the most damage are never the ones who look capable of it. They're the ones who bring you coffee you didn't ask for, and remember flowers you mentioned once, and make you feel, for 11 consecutive years, so safe that you stop checking the locks. We married in a small ceremony at the county courthouse, followed by dinner at the one Italian restaurant in town that did private rooms. 11 guests total. Leah, as my maid of honor at 13 years old, solemnly holding my bouquet like it was the most important job she'd ever been given. I remember thinking, that night, that I had finally, fully arrived at steady. That whatever my mother had meant by that word, I had built it, brick by brick, with my own 2 hands, and no one would ever be able to take it from me. 8 months before that midnight notification, on an ordinary Sunday evening, Daryl sat across from me at this same kitchen table with a folder of paperwork and a pen already uncapped. "Restructuring," he said, sliding it toward me. "Better interest rate on the joint accounts. My advisor found something that could save us almost $1,000 a year." I had graded 92 essays that week. I had a sinus headache that had lasted 4 days. Leah had a dentist appointment the next morning I still needed to confirm. I signed where he pointed, flipping past a page of dense legal font I told myself I'd read later. And later never came, because later almost never comes for people who trust the person handing them the pen. "This is just for the joint checking, right?" I remember asking, half paying attention, already thinking about the dentist appointment. "Mostly," he said. "There's a small linked authorization for the savings too, just in case we ever need quick access in an emergency. Standard stuff." Standard stuff. I think about those 2 words almost as often as I think about the click of the screen door when I was 6. Standard stuff was the exact phrase that gave a man I trusted for 11 years quiet, legal access to an account I had spent 15 years building for our daughter's future. An account he had never once, in all those years, contributed a single dollar toward. I think about that Sunday more than I think about almost anything else in my life now. Not with the shame people expect me to feel. I've made peace with that particular kind of shame, but with a strange, clinical curiosity. The way you'd study the exact moment a bridge began to fail, long before anyone standing on it could feel it shifting. By 1:15 a.m., I had stopped shaking long enough to actually think. I opened 7 months of statements, going back further than I ever normally would. And what I found wasn't one transfer, it was a pattern. 11 separate transfers, ranging from $600 to $4,000, spaced apart just unevenly enough to avoid tripping any obvious fraud alert, all moving toward the same destination. Vantage Creative Solutions, LLC. $43,112. Gone, over 7 months, from an account meant to buy my daughter's future. I didn't wake Daryl up. I didn't scream or throw the laptop or do any of the things I imagine you're picturing right now. I sat at that table until 4 a.m., printing statements I didn't need to print, just so I'd have something physical to hold on to, something with weight and paper texture, because my hands needed to do something, or I thought I might actually come apart. I made a pot of coffee I never drank. I stared at a photo on the refrigerator of the 3 of us at Leah's 8th grade graduation, Daryl's arm around my waist, all of us squinting into the sun, and I tried to figure out exactly which version of him standing in that photograph had already been lying to me, and for how long. At 6:02, Daryl came downstairs in his gray sweatshirt, hair still flattened from sleep, and poured himself coffee like it was any other Tuesday. "Morning," he said. I smiled. I said good morning back. And in that exact second, sitting there with $43,000 worth of printed evidence hidden in a manila folder under my school bag, I made a decision that would define everything that came after it. I decided to become the quietest, most patient version of myself that I had ever been in my entire life. Because I understood something in that moment that I don't think Daryl ever gave me credit for understanding. If I confronted him right then, with nothing but a stack of statements and a broken heart, he would have an explanation ready before I finished my first sentence. Men like Daryl always have an explanation ready. What he didn't have ready, what he couldn't possibly have ready, was for his wife to say absolutely nothing at all, for 3 entire weeks, while she quietly built a case strong enough that no explanation on earth could talk his way out of it. For the next 3 weeks, I lived 2 completely separate lives, and the discipline it took to keep them separate is something I still don't fully understand about myself. By day, Mrs. Day, English teacher, 3rd period sophomores working through The Great Gatsby, discussing the green light at the end of Daisy's dock like it was just a symbol in a novel, and not something I now understood with a clarity none of my students could yet imagine. 4th period seniors drafting college essays about resilience they didn't yet know they were about to watch their own teacher develop firsthand. By night, a woman methodically taking her own marriage apart, 1 drawer at a time, 1 receipt at a time, 1 saved draft text at a time. I found the lease agreement first, an apartment complex across town, Unit 4B, signed under a name I didn't recognize, Stacy Wren. I found a receipt for a ring, not the kind you buy as a gift between friends. I found text message drafts saved but never sent, the kind a careful man writes and rewrites before deciding they're too dangerous to send from a phone his wife might one day pick up. 1 line from those drafts I will never forget as long as I live. Margot is a temporary inconvenience. This will resolve itself before the summer. Temporary inconvenience. 23 years combined of dating and marriage, distilled by the man who lived in it into 4 words meant for someone else's eyes. I found a second phone, hidden inside a rolled-up gym sock in the back of his closet. The kind of hiding spot so predictable, it almost insulted me more than the affair itself did. I didn't dare turn it on, worried it might alert him somehow. But I photographed the model number and later learned from Detective Alvarez that it had been purchased in cash 8 months earlier, the exact same month he'd asked me to sign that restructuring paperwork. I photographed everything. I cataloged dates against bank statements. I built, over those 3 weeks, a case more thorough than some of the term papers I'd graded an A+ for, because unlike a term paper, this one had my daughter's entire future riding on getting every single detail correct. And then, on a Thursday evening in the 3rd week, I did something that even now surprises me when I think back on it. I decided I wasn't going to confront my husband first. I was going to knock on Stacy Wren's door. I found her address through a public business filing search. The same registration documents that had listed Vantage Creative Solutions listed a secondary contact. And the secondary contact's residential address was public record if you knew how to look. I stood outside apartment 4B for almost 10 full minutes before I found the nerve to knock, rehearsing at least 6 different versions of a sentence I never ended up needing. The door opened, and I found myself looking at a woman in her mid-30s with dark circles under red, swollen eyes, wearing an oversized cardigan and an expression that told me, before either of us said a single word, that something in this entire situation had already been unraveling long before I arrived. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice raw, like she'd been crying recently and hadn't stopped for long. "My name is Margot," I said. "I think we might know the same man." Her face didn't crumble the way I expected. It went very, very still. "Daryl," she said, not a question. I nodded. And then she said the sentence that changed the entire shape of this story. The sentence I never once saw coming in 3 weeks of careful, methodical investigation. "He told me you two got divorced 2 years ago. He showed me the paperwork." The floor, I swear to you, actually tilted underneath me. I had spent 3 weeks preparing myself for the discovery of an affair. I had not prepared myself for the discovery that my husband had built an entire second marriage, complete, apparently, with a forged divorce decree, convincing enough that a grown woman had believed it for over a year. She invited me in, mostly, I think, because neither of us could figure out what else to do with the strange, electric shock of the moment. Her apartment was small but carefully decorated, throw pillows arranged just so, a bookshelf organized by color instead of author. The kind of home you build when you're trying very hard to convince yourself that the life inside it is permanent. We sat at her small kitchen table until well past midnight that night, 2 strangers piecing together 2 different versions of the exact same lie. And somewhere around 11 p.m., laughing at something so dark it had circled all the way back around to absurd, Stacy said the thing that made me finally, truly understand what kind of man I had actually married. He proposed to me on a Tuesday. He said Tuesdays were unlucky for anyone else, but lucky for us specifically. I believed that. I actually believed that meant something. I told her about the yellow tulips, about the mother he'd never met, whose favorite flower he'd remembered for 11 years for a woman he apparently considered, in writing, a temporary inconvenience. Stacy went quiet for a long moment, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a small box, a bracelet, still in its original packaging, with a card that read, in Daryl's unmistakable handwriting, "For the only steady thing in my life. Happy anniversary, Dee." The same phrase, steady. My mother's word, twisted into a tool, handed to 2 different women like it had been custom built for each of us individually, when in fact, it had simply been recycled. $43,000 of my daughter's education had funded that apartment's furniture, Stacy's engagement ring, and, we discovered later, going through her own bank records together, 3 separate weekend trips billed to Vantage Creative Solutions as client retreats. Stacy was not the villain of this story. She was exactly as deceived as I was, 5 years younger and considerably poorer for it. By the time we said goodnight that Thursday, somewhere close to 1 a.m., we weren't enemies anymore. We were something closer to co-conspirators. We had a plan. And the plan did not involve tears or screaming or a scene at anyone's kitchen table. The plan took 11 days to assemble properly. Stacy and I met 4 more times, comparing timelines, matching receipts to lies, building a single, unified case out of 2 shattered ones. We met at a diner 2 towns over, careful never to be seen together anywhere Daryl might pass through, comparing our 2 versions of the same man, like detectives assembling a case file, laughing sometimes despite ourselves at how absurdly, precisely parallel our stories were. The same phrases, the same gestures, the same small kindnesses recycled and repurposed across 2 entirely separate lives, running in parallel for over a year. I hired a divorce attorney named Renata Osei, a woman with the calm, surgical patience of someone who has watched this exact story unfold 100 times before and stopped being surprised by any version of it years ago. She connected me with a financial fraud investigator, Detective Ren Alvarez, no relation to Stacy, a coincidence of surnames that felt almost cruelly funny given everything else, who specialized in exactly this kind of quiet, incremental theft. "You'd be amazed," Detective Alvarez told me during our first call, "how many men run 2 entire lives on nothing but timing and a willingness to lie with a completely straight face. The wives never see it coming. Neither do the girlfriends. Everyone assumes they're the only one being lied to." On the 12th day, everything was ready. Bank records, text drafts, the forged divorce decree, which forensic document analysis confirmed had been created using a template pulled from an online legal form site, badly enough that the county seal was visibly the wrong shade of blue, if you knew what you were looking for. Stacy's testimony, my testimony, a financial trail $43,000 long, mapped out with the same obsessive precision I usually reserved for grading rubrics. Daryl walked through our front door at 6:40 p.m. on a Tuesday, the same day of the week he'd once told Stacy was lucky, specifically for the 2 of them, and found me sitting at the kitchen table, with Renata Osei on my left and Detective Alvarez on my right. And sitting directly across from him, in the one chair he clearly never expected to see occupied, was Stacy Wren, holding a folder thicker than any explanation he could possibly invent on the spot. I watched his face do something I will remember until the day I die. It didn't fall immediately. For 1 full second, it tried to recalibrate, tried to find an angle, tried to locate whatever version of charm had gotten him out of smaller messes before. And then, watching Stacy's face, watching mine, watching the detective's badge sitting openly on the table, something behind his eyes simply gave up trying. "This isn't what it looks like," he said, the exact phrase, the one every liar reaches for in the precise moment they finally understand they've been caught. I'd almost expected it, and hearing it out loud still didn't make it any less pathetic. "Daryl," I said, and my voice came out steadier than it had in 3 weeks. "We both know it's exactly what it looks like." He looked at Stacy then, and whatever he said next, some fragmented attempt at, "Stace, I can explain," she cut off with a single raised hand, the kind of gesture that needs no accompanying words. Detective Alvarez slid a document across the table toward him, and I watched the exact moment he understood there was no version of charm, no explanation, no yellow tulip left in his arsenal that could undo what was already sitting on that table. The investigation that followed took 4 months, and I won't pretend those 4 months were easy, because pretending would insult everyone who has ever actually lived through something like this. There were nights I cried in my classroom closet during my lunch break because I couldn't do it in front of Leah. There were mornings I couldn't make myself eat. There was one particularly brutal Tuesday, of course it was a Tuesday, when Leah found one of the printed bank statements I'd forgotten to hide, and I had to explain to my 16-year-old daughter, in language gentle enough not to break her, but honest enough not to lie to her the way her father had lied to everyone, exactly what had happened to the money meant for her future. She didn't cry the way I expected. She got very quiet, the way I do, the way I now understand she inherited directly from me, and she said, "Okay, so what's the plan?" That's when I knew, for certain, that whatever else Daryl had taken from us, he hadn't managed to take that. There were harder days too, a deposition where I had to describe, in clinical, unemotional detail, 11 years of a marriage that had felt, right up until the very end, like the safest thing I had ever built. A moment in the courthouse hallway where Daryl's mother, who had never once been anything but kind to me, looked at me with an expression I still can't fully name, somewhere between grief and apology, and said only, "I don't know who raised that boy to be this. It wasn't me." I believed her. I still believe her. Some lies, I've learned, aren't inherited. Some people simply build them on their own, brick by brick, the same patient way I built my own steadiness. The bank froze the remaining assets of Vantage Creative Solutions within 3 weeks of our formal report. Detective Alvarez's investigation confirmed the forged divorce decree, adding a bigamy charge on top of the fraud charge, a combination she told me she'd personally encountered only twice before in an 18-year career. And both times, she added, almost laughing, eerily similar men. Same charm, same excuses, same absolute certainty they'd never get caught. We recovered $31,000 of the $43,000. Not everything, but enough combined with a scholarship Leah earned entirely on her own merit, the kind of merit no one can steal from you, for her to still walk onto that campus in the fall exactly as planned. Daryl pleaded guilty to avoid a trial. Fraud and bigamy, sentenced concurrently. Stacy and I sat next to each other in the courtroom on sentencing day, two women who'd started as strangers connected only by a shared lie, and left as something else entirely. Not quite friends, not quite family, but something that doesn't have a clean word yet. Soldiers, maybe. Survivors of the exact same war, fought from two different angles of the exact same lie. Leah started college this past September. She's studying finance, which she announced to me with a fierce, deliberate calm that told me she'd thought about the decision for a long time before saying it out loud. "I want to understand money well enough," she told me, packing the last box into my car the day I drove her to campus, "that nobody can ever do to me what he did to you." I didn't say anything for a moment. I just held on to that sentence, the way I'd held on to those printed bank statements at 4 a.m., because it was something solid I needed to physically feel to believe. Stacy and I still talk, occasionally, a text on hard anniversaries, a phone call when one of us needs to hear from someone who actually understands, without explanation, exactly what it feels like to have believed a lie that convincing for that long. Last month, she sent me a photo of a small apartment she'd finally moved into on her own. No shared furniture, no borrowed money, just hers. The caption read only, "Steady. Finally mine." I laughed out loud when I read it, alone in my kitchen, because of course she'd landed on that word too. Of course she had. Some words, it turns out, find their way to exactly the people who need them, no matter how many times they've already been broken and rebuilt by someone else's lies. I don't open my banking app with dread anymore. I open it now with something closer to quiet, hard-won control, the kind you only earn by staying up until 4 a.m. once, printing evidence with shaking hands, deciding that silence could be sharper than any scream. If you asked me what I would change, looking back at all of it, there's really only one answer, and it isn't the 11 years of marriage, or the 8 months of quiet theft, or even the 3 weeks I spent taking my own life apart one drawer at a time. It's this. I wish I'd read that notification 5 minutes sooner. What would you have done, discovering the truth at midnight, sitting 12 feet away from the person who'd already decided you were nothing more than a temporary inconvenience? Tell me in the comments below. And subscribe, because next week, I'm telling you about the story that starts with a jacket pocket, a receipt that shouldn't exist, and an ending that not one of you will see coming until it's already too late.